So when you see these top players who are just out there playing, they're playing. Like, let's not forget, we play hockey, right? As much as it's a job, like we play hockey, and it's important to remember that it's supposed to be play based, because that's where you can really access that artistic side of your brain and become you become the master of your own domain in that regard. So it's like, it definitely starts with a mindset, and then there's got to be a consistent approach to that. That doesn't mean you don't go in the gym. That means when you're in the gym, you're focused on being in the gym. Then when you're done the gym, you're focused on your recovery. When you're in practice, you're focused on getting better. You have a specific, set to get better. It also means, like, if something bad happens, if you have a bad shift or a bad game or a bad year or a bunch of injuries, which, I had a million, you've got to be able to just keep resetting.
That was 14-year NHL veteran Andy Sutton, and you're listening to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey Podcast for episode number 55. We have 54 episodes in the book already, and we're hitting number 55. It just blows me away every single time. And this might be your first podcast, your first time here listening to Up My Hockey. And if it is, welcome. Love new listeners. Hope you really enjoy this one and you stick around. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. A lot of people don't understand how the podcast world works. It goes off downloads. So downloads is what is like the most important thing for podcast hosts like myself, because that is what gets tracked. You can stream an episode, but that actually means nothing to the stats of the podcast. So podcasters are always asking you to subscribe, because then that episode goes onto your device. And obviously, hopefully you listen to it. I'd love you to listen to all of them. But even if you don't listen to it and it gets downloaded, you can always erase it, and if you don't plan on listening to it. So a subscription is amazing. It means that the episode gets downloaded, and I appreciate you for that. The downloads just recognize the popularity of the episode. And when the episode gains more popularity, it gets recommended to more people, which means more people have eyes on it and more people have a chance to see it. So we are trying to grow this podcast strictly from the organic realm, which means, word of mouth, which means people talking about it, sharing it on their social media platforms or in their inner circles. And also from the podcast platforms, they recommending it to other people. So that happens with downloads, and that happens with reviews. So if you are a longtime listener who hasn't yet left a review, and I know there are a lot of you, you'd be doing the podcast a huge favor. The athletes who haven't yet listened to this podcast a huge favor, because your review means that they're more likely to see it. So that would be amazing. As far as today's episode, we are talking with Andy Sutton. Andy is a 14-year NHL veteran. Played on 6, 7, 8 teams, which is massively impressive. One, to play over 600 games in the NHL. Andy's a big boy, 6'6", 250 pounds. When he played, he was a stay-at-home defenseman that took care of business in front of his net and tried to keep the puck out. Also would drop the gloves when he had to. But as impressive as that is, what really impressed me with Andy's story is his genesis story of becoming an NHL player. He did not take the typical path. I love how everyone has a different way to get to be a professional or to get to be an NHLer, and Andy's is really special. From scoring 6 goals in 3 combined years in Division I hockey, getting signed to a partial scholarship. He blossomed in his senior year after transitioning to D. He was not a defenseman when he got recruited, turned into a defenseman during his time at university, and then had 14 different NHL teams lined up to give him a contract at the end of his senior year, and it can happen that fast. So really cool story. We get into all that. Andy happens to be, without me even knowing, like essentially an advertisement for what I do with mindset. We talk quite extensively about mindset and what the mental approach means to athletes these days, how it helped him, some of the different skills that he used to generate to get himself through the NHL seasons and his NHL trades and his injuries. And yeah, so we have really good talks about mindset, about gratitude, mental toughness, so on and so forth. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. It's a good introduction if it's your first one. If this is episode number 55 for you and you've listened to all 54 before, you're going to get more of what you love, which is some authentic conversation from real people about a game that we love and what it takes to be great within it. So without further ado, I bring you my friend, Andy Sutton. All right, Mr. Sutton, it looks like we're live here for episode 55 of the Up My Hockey podcast. And guest today is Andy Sutton, longtime NHLer, 14 seasons, but someone who came from what looks like some humble beginnings. And I want to get into that today. But thanks for joining us here, Andy.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jason.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, this show, as you know, it's about the journey, and you know, we've gotten in touch because of, you know, Verbero there over the last little while, and in doing that, I was able to dig in a little bit on your story, and I looks like it's an awesome story. To be quite honest, to end up being in the NHL for as long as you were from kind of where you came from, I think is super cool and inspiring, probably. So why don't you walk us through like what was minor hockey like for you, and was you know, your exposure? I know like the typical question there to get us going, but you know, what was that like, the genesis story of Andy Sutton in the game?
Oh man, right out of the gate, safe codes. But it's you know, like everything, I think all roads lead to Rome. I think it's an interesting story because I get kind of like a lot of things, it goes and it comes back around, and you know, I think if we're succeeding in life, we're able to kind of take those pieces and hopefully get better and evolve through our process. But like minor hockey, I was started as a defenseman. I don't know why. Maybe I was tall, you know, for my age as a kid, and then you know, I was scoring a lot of points there. So I think at 11 or 12, they decided to move me to forward, which, you know, in hindsight was good, maybe bad. I don't know. You know, I got to obviously focus on more of the offensive side of the game for the next like 7 years. Right. So I got a scholarship to Michigan. Well, it was probably before that. I mean, I didn't make my midget team. So I went and played tier 2 junior B with men with mustaches and jobs and baby mama drama and the whole deal. So that was I really at 15 and 16, I did that. And so
talk about that. So you had different aspirations though. So you wanted to play on this midget team, go to camp, do the thing, and that doesn't work out for you. So then you had, do you think that was the right call at that point? Like, did you feel like, man, I should have made that team, someone screwed me, or how did you feel in that environment?
No, I was a bit of a late bloomer. Like, I think I was a little late to the party. You know, I think, I probably started maturing a little bit later than some guys. So I think I got kind of left by the wayside there, like around 14, 15, 16. I think I was behind the curve. And I think that, you know, that didn't necessarily help with confidence either, which is so important when you're playing, obviously. And so actually, like, you know, getting a chance to go play with those much older players, I think, you know, set the stage for me getting used to some other things downstream, you know. So, you know, I had a great coach there named Wilf Johnson that was an amazing part of my life, you know, at that time, I think. And that team, because I was the youngest player by far on the team, they really took me under their wing and taught me things, and took care of me, and really treated me well. So that kind of, you know, set the stage out of there. And I got to play in a summer tournament series for this sort of select team, and went into the tournament, and I was never really a fighter. Like in junior B, I was a young guy. Like I'd sure had gotten a few, but it was never a thing. And then I got in a scrap with this guy who was like an OHL draft pick, and he picked a fight with me the first game, and I absolutely lambasted him in this tournament. And the thing was, like, all the other teams were watching, right? So the rest of the tournament, like, nobody came within 5 feet of me. I think I won, you know, best player in the tournament or whatever, scored a bunch of goals. And there was a man named Dave Barrett who happened to be there watching the event. He was scouting for the then St. Michael's Buzzards, the tier 2 team. So okay. I got invited to go play at St. Mike's, which at the time, you know, was one of, if not the preeminent school to go to if you were going to try to get a scholarship, which for me sounded like the perfect recipe. Like, I don't think, truthfully, like, I always probably had aspirations to play in the NHL. But I mean, I had to accept a partial scholarship to go play at Michigan Tech. I got a scholarship as a forward. They with the NHL lockout of 94, 95, Pierre Page was in with the club, kind of doing he was friends with our coach, Bob Mancini, who's the director of USA Hockey now. But Pierre came in and spent 2 weeks with our club and gave assessments on every player. And when he left, Mancini called me into his office. He said, "You want to hear what Pierre had to say about you?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, of course." He said, "Try Sutton at defense." So I was like, he's like, "What do you think?" And to that point, like I had a very lackluster freshman year. I wasn't doing much of anything my sophomore year to that point. And I said, "Sure, let's go for it." So I immediately made the switch. And as you can imagine, there were probably some growing pains there. In the junior year, I had an injury and it never really, went that well for me. And I had an internship offer with the US Navy summer before my senior year. And at this point, I'm honestly thinking like, man, if I play a couple of years, like bump around on the coast or go play somewhere like for a couple of years, I'll be probably happy and I'll just go back to school or start to work or whatever. I never really at that point thought it was even possible to play in the NHL or even really for a long time.
I'm going to start because I totally want to get into that year and I want you because it's a crazy jump and then everything that happened. But like, can we go back a little bit though? Because like I don't want to fast forward through that stuff because like a lot of the people that are listening now, like those are big decisions right there. Like to not make that midget team and then to make that choice to go to junior B, which some people would classify as death. Like you don't want to be there doing that. How did that decision get made? Even instead of playing like say on the second tier midget team, like who was in your corner and what was that discussion like to say this is the best idea for us is to go junior B?
I'm going to have to ask my dad about that because I don't remember anything but that was where we were going to go. And I don't know what the decision was. Maybe it was just like flat out that it was the first time I'd ever not made the AAA club. And I was just like, well, I'm not going to go play AA. I'll figure something else out. And I've always kind of been that way. Like I've never been afraid to push a new frontier. I've never been afraid of challenge. My ambition is has been reckless at times, I would say, in my life, but I almost always figure it out. I haven't met a situation that I haven't been able to figure out. So in that regard, like I like to push the limits, and I think that's part of like where this all started to breed inside me, right? Like you start to by necessity, right? How many amazing things are grown by necessity?
Yeah.
So I think that was the case, and I got to get in there with men who had a whole different way of looking at things, different way of playing. It was a different style of play. And I think—
How old were you at this point?
I'm 15. First year.
Okay, so you're 15 playing junior B. Are you billeted?
No, I'm living at home. My dad didn't even want me on the bus because the guys would have beers after the game and stuff, right? So he'd actually follow the bus and drive me to and from every game, right? And so he's driving me all over Eastern Ontario, taking great care of me, and he always did. He was in my corner every step of the way,
So I would assume, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you must have been fighting that tooth and nail. Because you want to be accepted and be part of the boys, and not necessarily that means having a beer on the bus, but I assume you want to be on the bus with the guys, right?
Yeah, I did. And he'd let me take the bus sometimes, and other times, I don't know what the distinction was or like what all was going on. I'm going to ask him about this now that you bring it up, because I haven't had a chance to dive back with him. It was a really interesting time, a big growth phase for me. And then I think, if I hadn't done that, maybe I wouldn't have got to go to that, that summer tournament. Maybe I wouldn't have learned how to, handle myself a little bit in a few of the fights I got in junior B, because you know how that is. Those games can get out of hand. It can be crazy. You go into like trying to think of what there's one rink in particular. I can't remember which team it was. You go in, it's like the smallest arena you've ever played in, and they were like a big physical team. Like, so you go in there, you're just terrified. You're like 15, 16 years old. These guys are chasing you all over the ice. But and those experiences harden you a little bit, and prepare you. And then really the time at Michigan Tech was invaluable for me, and thankfully I was able to convert the detriment side of my scholarship, which was a partial scholarship on academic.
Yeah, so junior B. So I'm going to cut in again, but it's junior B. So you go from junior B and play well enough there, or get invited to that event. And I can relate to that, by the way, because I was 15 playing junior A though in BC in the BCHL, right? So I was playing with Paul Correa that year. Was on the team. A couple other pretty good players were on that team too, and I was 15. There was like two of us in the entire league, I think, maybe three, right? So. I was trying to decide between playing second year bantam or playing, or playing junior A, right? I was listed by Spokane at the time. So that was a big decision, right? Like where to play. And then, and why I think it's worth chatting about is just because of that. You mentioned men, right? And for those listening, you're being 15 and in grade 10 is a heck of a lot different than being 20 and out of school for 2 years, and there were guys in our team like that. And the league was like that too. And it was, not that it was a jungle, the league, but there was definitely fights. I got in 3 fights, I think that year. It was my first 3 fights, playing against guys that were 50, 60, 70 pounds heavier than me. Right. With beards and the whole 9 yards, not to mention the rookie stuff that goes on in that, in that time frame. So, it makes you grow up. I don't know, how were you from a maturity standpoint? Did you feel like you were ready for that? Was that a good thing that you needed, or maybe was it too much too soon?
I think that honestly, in retrospect, I was probably a little soft. I probably needed it, and maybe that's where my dad gave me a nudge, and he had known Wilf a little bit. So maybe there was a conversation there. I'm going to find out after this call. Now I'm really curious, but I think I think I needed that experience, to toughen me up a little bit. Because I think sometimes and I'm not saying in general, but I can imagine a young player who, especially and the same for you, you're really good, we're good at a young age, and you come up through AAA program, you kind of got a silver spoon in your mouth. Truthfully, everything's done for you. Your family drives you all around. It's expensive. You haven't really mostly had to suffer too many hard knocks where you've had to go and figure out something new, right? Those points where, and really every time in my life where I've been confronted with those types of things, and that's where growth occurs. Anytime you put yourself in a situation, you find out what you're made of. You find out what you're made of, what you extract from it, and hopefully you come out a better version. So I look at that. I look at that time in my life, and I say this to people all the time. And I've been doing business for a while now, but then I would say when I retired, I'd say I've been doing business for a really long time, because you make these decisions. And when hockey became the business of my life, I've been doing business for years, because you're always kind of navigating, best case scenario. You're trying to find a way to fit in, find a way to carve out a role for yourself, an identity, finding out other ways in which you can get better within that. But then lo and behold, it'll change again, so to endure and play as long as we did, you got to wear a lot of hats. You've got to be willing to do all the stuff. And I don't think I would have been able to do that to the same degree if I hadn't challenged myself. I hadn't left to go to a school in the middle of nowhere. If I hadn't, gone and played junior B in Gananoque. And thankfully I had some great people that and great coaches along the way that were able to care for me as well.
So you're in junior B. You get you knock this guy out at this elite camp. Somebody sees you. St. Mike's grabs you. Which at that point, what level is that? That's junior A level?
Tier 2. I think they called it Tier 2 junior A back then. And it was
a lot of guys were going from there to the university routes.
Yeah. That was kind of at the time. You're looking early 90s. That was really when scholarships became a very attractive option, and people started thinking wow, this is a great way to go. And then lo and behold, we see the evolution of that, right? And the bottom line is nowadays, if you're a great player, or if you can evolve into becoming a great player, they're going to find you. It's easier than ever to find people, right? So I say to every parent now that I talk to, I'm as great as major junior can be for some guys, in a lot of ways, I feel like you're missing out on a life experience that really can help set the stage for you for the rest of your life outside, because that's the next thing, going to school. And I studied engineering during school. So again, lofty ambition, but at the same point in time, it made me, I had to carry an education in engineering while I was trying to play Division I hockey. Again, another massive hardening event, because it's no joke. You have no space for error. You've got to be super focused in what you're doing, well balanced, and then you still want to be at the frat parties and the sorority parties and doing all this stuff. So I think it teaches you that balance, and then coming out the other side of it, I don't necessarily use my engineering education, but at the same point in time, I think the critical thinking that I was able to learn while I was there helps me every day in everything I'm doing. So all the things kind of connect, in the end.
Yeah, no, I like talking with college guys, because the one thing, there's very few, and I have had a couple on the program that have been able to experience both major junior and university. Obviously, it's the guys that go from university back to major junior, because you can't go the other way. So maybe they're a little bit biased because they've left, the university system to come to major junior for something that wasn't working out for them. But I would really like to have gone there. I was a really good student. I was recruited by, Ivy League schools, and I mean, at 14, 15, like the best that they could do, you know what I mean, like at the time. But I had my heart set on Spokane, and then I'm going to Spokane, and those were the most, those are your formative years, right? I mean, getting into now university, like I totally remember that time of my life more than any other time and during pro hockey, for sure. Like to a granular level, and I wouldn't change that experience. And it wasn't all roses by any means, right? There was a lot of ups and downs and a lot of learning, but I totally did love that experience. So I wouldn't trade that in. I love being a Spokane Chief, but I would love to have been able to experience university. I mean, I not because there's anything wrong with major junior, but I just think that environment. And then looking back on my own career, because which is I want to talk with you about. You're arriving on the scene at 22. Almost at that age, I was like almost cast off as being like, I'm not a pro, so you do have to start. You enter the game earlier, right? You enter the game earlier, and then there's a lot of these labels and stuff that gets passed on you. But I just want to go back. So you're at St. Mike's. How many years were you at St. Mike's?
Just the one season. I think I signed.
So you had a pretty good season from a point standpoint. Did you know, and quite a few PIMs too? Like, did you kind of have an idea of who you were as a player at that point?
By that point in time, like I started to like fill into my size, because I grew. I think I grew, when I was 15. I think I grew like 7 inches in a calendar year. Took me like a year or two to like catch up with my body, figure out like which, what I was doing. I lost, and that took a lot of the fun out of it for me, like you're used to being good and contributing. And then I was fighting my body, and just my own personal development. So, and you don't know that at the time, like you don't know that that's what's happening. You just think what's happening to me, So the time at St. Mike's, I think it started to kind of come back together, where I started to get some relative control. I had definitely felt like I had a bit of an identity in the game, and like that's so important, because I'd say this to people all the time: like if you don't know what you are, your coach's staff isn't going to know what you are, and that's the thing that drives them the craziest. All they want to know is exactly what you're going to do on the wing, or I'm going to do on defense, right? So that they can put the plan together, right? So it's so imperative to have that self-belief, and then definition, and then working towards the consistency that I think every team wants, because I think that you and I both probably played a lot of amazing players that were like, it was always like lightning in a ball. And I'd see it so often when guys would get called up, like a top tier player, they'd have a few good games, and then all of a sudden it would literally go like tank right off. They're super excited, 2-3 games. It's just not sustainable. To sustain it, you've got to have like a very assured identity. And I think all of those things along the way, like help you identify that and carve that out for yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a personal element to that, meaning, who you are as a person and being comfortable with that, and then figuring that out as far as a player is concerned. And when you're trying to juggle both, that's really hard, especially at the pro level, because what I mean by that is what we've already touched on is like when you go into those new locker rooms, you're trying to navigate that space as a person, right? Yet you're playing hockey, right? So you're with all these different personalities, and like, how do I fit in here? Because sometimes it's an older team, sometimes it's a younger team, sometimes, like who knows what that looks like. And you got to be strong enough with whoever it is you are. And then you got to impress the coach from a player standpoint. And I like talking about that stuff, because I think that's the stuff that, usually doesn't get talked about, like that fitting in, which is why I think it's so wild that you were behind the bus in in your dad's vehicle. Yeah. That's super wild. But so you got a partial scholarship. Was that, I assume you didn't turn down any full scholarships, so that was just the way it was, and that was who gave you something, and off you went.
Yeah, and it came, and I've seen this time again in my life, like a lot of times I feel like the thing, if you're in a position to receive it, the thing that sort of surfaces first is maybe the thing that's meant for you in a lot of ways, and they were first to the table. I had an opportunity to take a look at going to Brown. My family couldn't afford to send me to Brown. And I didn't want to wait like too much longer in the year, because I can't remember which month I committed, but it took a little bit of time. And then once it finally came, I was like, okay, good. This is the next piece. And my family was good with putting up some money for the deficiency and the full scholarship. And then thankfully I was able to make the dean's list in the first term, and I was able to convert the rest to academics. So I ended up being on a full ride the entire time, which was obviously like a lot of pressure off my family, and then
Mom and dad are happy with that.
Yeah, and it felt nice that I could contribute that back, because at a certain point, I started to feel not like certainly thankful, but like also, maybe even guilty in a certain regard. Like our families put up so much of their time and money to like let us have this opportunity, and then it feels really nice at that point to be like, okay, good, I've got this now,
Yeah.
And then from there, I kind of, I kind of had it the rest of the way. So that was a big piece for me. Tech was a big piece for me, because I could go there. And, even with the, going from forward to defense, but I had a space where I could, you practice hard all week. You have games on the weekend, you practice hard all week. So there's a real repetition to it. It was very like gym focused. So I could really get my body, harden and get my mind in the right place. And then you have to work the balance of things throughout the process, which I think is invaluable, and I had two great coaches. I really did. I mean, I had Bob Mancini, who was an amazing coach, a very intense man, very great coach. And then Tim Waters came in, long time NHL defenseman. And he was one of the most passionate coaches I've ever had. And I think because of my role on the team and my sort of role escalating, he came in my junior year. So, the 2 years I had him, and by senior year, like I was his guy. So he invested a lot in me, teaching me a lot of things. And that was really only like my, I'd only been a defenseman for a little over a year, at that point. So I needed, if he hadn't come in, I don't know what would have happened. Right. Long time NHL defenseman, like kind of, fought in the trenches kind of guy, which is sort of how I patterned myself. And in the end, it ended up being a great relationship.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say, welcome Andy Sutton. We are live here. Part of the Up My Hockey podcast, which makes it special, is that I do bring it live sometimes. So you can hear it either at Up My Hockey, the parent group, or sometimes I put it on my personal channel. So we are live, and there are people watching. So thanks so much for joining us today. We have 14-year NHL defenseman Andy Sutton with us today. And if you want to ask a question to Andy, by all means, throw it in the comment section. And I like to include those who want to watch. So if you have anything for Andy throughout the conversation, please do. And for those of you listening too, like, I'm sitting here with Andy's rap sheet, the back of his hockey card sitting here in front of me. And as a forward, Andy had 2 goals in 19 games as a freshman, 2 goals in 32 games I guess it's called a sophomore, right? And then as a junior, 2 goals again in 32 games. But at this point, I think you are a defenseman, correct? Your last year?
Yeah.
So speak to that. Like you said, you were not thinking NHL aspirations. You weren't thinking 14 teams lined up to sign me in my last year. You're thinking, what's after this? How can I maybe use this? Walk us through that point in your life. Like, hockey was a vehicle for you to get education at that point, was really what it was looking like, right?
It was. And, deep down, I always dreamed about it, and the dream never left me. And I would say if you asked anybody along the journey of my time at Tech, any of the guys that went to school with me would say Andy was one of the hardest working guys in the gym. He had the, I was crazy about it. Like I really wanted to do it. I didn't know if it was possible, truthfully, especially after that junior season, and that pivot point, that sliding doors moment where you get, really offered a potential dream job, right? So I'm studying hard. I'm studying engineering in the U.S. Navy. I met a guy that, that I obviously endeared myself to in some regard, and he offered me up an internship to go live in D.C. for the summer. Well, I decided to give it one last kick at the can. And, it wasn't because I stayed at school and trained hard that summer. And especially nowadays, everyone's in great shape. So it's not about, it's not about the gym. The gym is part of it. It's part of your responsibility as an athlete to make sure your body's in shape. It was my mind, and it was almost like, okay, well, I don't know what's laying beyond this. And every time I've had this experience in my life where you almost cast aside expectations and you just go out and you just be, you're just completely at one with the moment and not trying to get too far ahead or too far behind. And I don't know what happened that year, if it was that mindset or the stars aligning or what it was, but like everything I touched worked that year. And I ended up winning Defensive Player of the Year, and I was named All-American. And I mean, it went from very much nothing, and no, probably, aspirations necessarily even to do more. Like I wasn't sure it was even possible to like partway through that year. I was like, this is really possible. Like this is really actually happening. And I think it really was, Jason, like because I let it go. Like I just let it go and I trusted my instincts. I played through my instincts. I embraced every moment, and I knew like if it was going to be my last year, I was going to have a blast and I was going to be thankful for it. And it really just all aligned into, what you said. I mean, I was undrafted, right? I never got drafted in major junior. I never got drafted in the NHL, and I had 14 teams basically offer me, first round dollars, coming out of my last game at Tech, which was nuts. I mean, and another big business decision. I turned down a little bit more money from the St. Louis Blues, who at the time had Chris Pronger and Al McInnes, to go sign with the Sharks because they had a few older defensemen and Jeff Norton and Gary Suter and Bob Rouse. And I thought I had a faster track opportunity to get into the NHL. And these are the decisions that you start making before you even really understand what it is you're doing,
Yeah, right. And so you talked about like your body, that you were in shape, that you were always in shape, that you're always looking after your facility, because you were wise enough to understand that. But that last year, it was more about your mind and being able to let go. So I 100% agree with that. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but how can someone listening, like, was there a conscious choice somewhere in that process? Was it like, how did you apply that ability to do that? Like, okay, I'm just going to let it go. Or was it just something that organically happened?
It's something that in one form or another, I've probably always been, that I always think about. And I would say I've had dozens now probably of occurrences where just different things in my life have aligned where probably they were always meant to. And it's always been because I've made a choice to let go of expectation. Because expectation is a killer. And then if you think about it, and I say this to people all the time, like if you're living in regret and remorse, which a lot of people do, you're living in the past. And if you're living in fear and anxiety, you're living in the future. So that's like, I'm worried about the game. I'm worried about my next shift. I'm worried about making mistakes. Am I gonna play for this, better team next year? Am I going to elevate my position? And am I working hard enough? Am I eating the right food? Am I drinking enough water? Is my dad happy? What do my parents think about this? Like, and you can get in this vicious cycle of carrying all this stuff. All the while, it's so prohibitive for a myriad of reasons. But the other thing is when you start to understand that your unconscious mind. So now you're talking about, and I'm talking more like playing instinctually and just being instinctual as a human, because at a certain point, you've got enough of a skill set to where if you're truthfully trusting in yourself and you can process from your unconscious mind, you can process thought at like 10,000 times the speed of your conscious mind. So when you see these top players who are just out there playing, they're playing. Like, let's not forget, we play hockey, right? As much as it's a job, like we play hockey, and it's important to remember that it's supposed to be play-based, because that's where you can really access that artistic side of your brain and become you become the master of your own domain in that regard. So it's like, it definitely starts with a mindset, and then there's got to be a consistent approach to that. That doesn't mean you don't go in the gym. That means when you're in the gym, you're focused on being in the gym. Then when you're done the gym, you're focused on your recovery. When you're in practice, you're focused on getting better. You have a specific, set to get better. It also means, like, if something bad happens, if you have a bad shift or a bad game or a bad year or a bunch of injuries, which, I had a million, you've got to be able to just keep resetting, right? To be able to go back and restore yourself. And you've got to be more like the family dog. Like you can leave your dog at home all day and with no food and no water, and they're still going to come and lick you and shit, wag their tail when they come and see you. Just they're so present. They're not living in like, oh, you left me here all day, like I don't have any food and water. We've got to be more like that as athletes in some regard. Like, you've got to be able to just live in the now, like the right now. The next shift is not guaranteed. The next game, the next year, anything. And then the shift before it falls away, but, behind your heels. I mean, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Literally nothing, except learn from it, right? So your responsibility in that moment is like, okay, I've got to learn from this. I should do this differently. And then you've got to go forward, because the thing is, like, if you're being put out for the next shift, if you're still in, thinking about the mistake you made the shift prior, you're done. You're going to compound your errors. Coach is going to bench you. You're going to be pulled out of the lineup. It's a downward spiral. So I think just, trying to work on that, like that mindfulness and just being omnipresent in your own journey and experience is the most important thing that an athlete, especially a young athlete, can focus on. And I think it's the most important thing that a parent can help their son or daughter with, to try to just be appreciative for the very moment that you're in. Do your best, certainly, because that's a prerequisite. But then outside of that, you kind of just have to let it all fall away, because if you're doing your best, being honest about it, right, and then you're caring for other people, which means on and off the ice. What else is there really? Have a good time, right? Because it's play. We're supposed to be playing. We're supposed to be having a good time.
Which we forget about, and I think that's really well said, because that's one thing that I talk about and teach and coach is that ability, the perspective, right? The ability of perspective, combined with intention, which you talked about at the very beginning there. Like, the intention is like granular, singular, and not this big bandwidth of things, right? So you're going into the gym. What are you trying to accomplish in there, right? You're in the moment, in that space, doing that thing, right? You're approaching practice with the same type of intentionality and the same perspective. And if you have that perspective, which is so much easier said than done, but like, of what can I learn from this piece of adversity, or where is the opportunity in this setback, instead of the opposite, right? The regret, the remorse, that scenario, like, my gosh, like, you're just in a position to succeed, right? Because you're actually looking for a way to succeed, not a reason for why you failed, right? And all that is a choice in that moment. And I think for me, I don't know, I believe that's something that can be taught. And I mean, I've seen it in the people that I'm working with that it can be, but it's not a natural thing for a lot of people, to go there, right?
No, it's really not. And you think about how much, and I remember somebody telling me this, and it was sort of like the first piece that started to resonate with me. And I was fortunate. I read a lot of stuff, and I was able to connect through the course of my life with a few different sports psychologists and things. And it's like, there's several examples. Like, and I remember Bob Rouse telling me, he's like, because you beat yourself up about errors. Well, if you really think about it, the game starts with a mistake, right? Somebody loses a face-off, right? So if you think of it from that standpoint, and in life in general, are we not truthfully measured by our response to adversity? Like, is that really not what it is in the end? Like how we're measured, right? And because when things are flowing and they're going, seemingly perfect, like that's not where growth occurs. That's and it's great to be at homeostasis for periods of time, and if you're doing that at a very high level, then that's probably like sets you up for long-term success. But most people, I feel like, we're always kind of like two steps, step backwards, two steps forward, kind of that process. And that's kind of how I feel like my career always went. But if you're always able to reflect, and then if you're reflecting on things, it's important to have appreciation, because you can't really reflect properly from a position of like self-deprecation. It has to be from a position of optimism, right? Because we have to look for the best bit from it without degrading yourself in the process, right? To bring yourself higher, and then you're just evolving to a higher state of being, and then it's probably going to showcase itself through your play. So I mean, it's a daunting road, but I do believe it can be taught, to your point. And I think it's a kind of thing that, like meditation, and I'm not an active, like, sit on the floor, focus on my breathing meditation guy. I think life is supposed to be like a meditation, right? Like, I think your process in your life, and even us being here now, like, there's nothing else. there's only the now, right? Mm-hmm. So for us to just be thankful in that, invest the time what that is, and then when this is done, move on to the 400 emails I've got to return today.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the way it goes. Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that, for sure, about our perspective and what we choose to see. And the thing is, which I wish I embraced more when I was going through it. Now, I don't know what it is. Like, I think it was a perspective change in just my own life. But now, when I do run into something that, whatever there's resistance to, that I don't like, that's hard, I can really recognize it. Well, this is the exact thing that you need. Yeah. Those are the things that you said. The one step back is the thing that nobody wants all the time, the one step back. But that one step back is the thing that allows you to take the two steps forward that you're really proud about, that you know that you've grown from, as you say. Like, so all those, like, those little setbacks, or even the big ones, right? The ones that you don't really think or see coming, like that. Those are the ones. Anyone that's been on this show, like, that's like, those are the moments that have, like, galvanized who they are, what they're about, what they found out about themselves, what they proved to their coach, whatever the thing was, right? That allowed them to become who they were. So, to recognize in the moment that this shitty time is actually probably going to be the greatest thing for you. Being able to turn that switch is pretty powerful, I think. And I wish I would have had that a little bit more back when I was playing, because I got stuck in the sometimes in the victim side a little bit too often, like, why me, why now, why not that guy, like kind of that sort of thought process. And that definitely doesn't serve anybody.
No, for sure. It's so counterproductive to your own personal growth, right? And you're right, Jason. Like you have to use these opportunities, and without the change in perspective, you can't really, you can't see the mountain for the plane. Like if you're right up against it, you have to be able to step back and see where you've come from. You have to be able to look and say, wow, I've really actually climbed a really fair distance, even though like I'm right up against this thing. And then there's certain times where you can sit and have a cup of hot chocolate or something like that and take it all in, right? And that's so often, especially as athletes, where you're face down and you're grasping, climbing rocks are falling away. Like it's such a daunting thing, but it is so important to make time and space to gain that perspective, because that's really where the growth occurs, and you get that inherently from the setbacks, from the injuries, from the, whatever the setbacks are. You get that opportunity, that space where when you're in it every day, day in, day out, that's not always the time where the growth occurs.
This first break is brought to you for the dancer in your life. I am a huge fan of my wife and what she's doing in the dance world. She is mentoring young dancers to take their game to a new level, to really support those dancers that want to take their game to the professional level. And in doing so, and using her 10 years of experience in the field herself back in Los Angeles, working for the likes of Paul McCartney and Britney Spears and on movie sets, she is somebody that you want to listen to. So if you have a dancer in your life, a son, daughter, niece, nephew, grandchild, by all means, this program is for you. It can be found at mydance.ca. It's a 4-week program brought to you by my wife, Miss Sarah Smith Podolin. And every day there's a video. Every weekend there's a live group chat where she'll coach these athletes through some of the things away from the dance studio that they can do to make themselves better. And she's brilliant at what she does. She's really excited about the program, as am I. It kicks off this March 15th. And all the Up My Hockey listeners, she is giving a discount code to, which is UpMyHockey20. So when you sign out of mydance.ca, once again, mydance.ca, for Sarah's 4-week program, you get to use UpMyHockey20 as a discount code and get $20 off. I believe the course is $179. Don't quote me on that. I think it's $179 for the 4 weeks. Fantastic value. This is nothing like anything your dancer has ever taken before, and it's something that she should have taken before, or he should have taken before. So yeah, get yourselves in there. Line up that dancer. It's going to be amazing. I'm really excited for all the work that my wife has put in to see this thing come to fruition. Your dancer will benefit substantially, I promise you. So mydance.ca to get them in there. Once again, UpMyHockey20 for your discount code. Thanks, and now back to the episode with Andy. Yeah, no, for sure. We are live on Facebook, as I said, and a few other places, and somebody has commented on my mug. So this is from last year, Suts. And this is like my team ended up giving me this cup with every logo that I ever played for. It was like such a cool present. So I brought it out today and it was recognized. So I should show that and acknowledge that was a pretty good year. And we do have a question from so thanks Monty Hogberg for recognizing that. And I'll show this one. This is actually an interesting one. Good morning, guys. From Jared Bissett. I have one question. If you could go back, tell yourself 1 or 2 hockey skills you should work on more, what would that be? I'll go first, and I'll let you give a little time to think, because I'm not going to actually say what I should have worked on. But what I found, Suts, which is so kind of counterintuitive, is that once I became a pro, I kind of stopped working on the getting better, which now I didn't really realize until probably in the last year or so. Like in junior, I was always out in the ice and always like with guys, not even really knowing that I was consciously working on stuff, but I was, right? I was last one off, would leave the building late. And then when I got to pro, it was almost like it became a job, and it was almost like it was I don't know, like I wasn't on there working on I was working on my shot still, I guess, but not really consciously about anything else. You know, I mean, I was almost like in homeostasis, as you said, like status quo. I made it. This is what I'm about. I'm scoring goals. I'm okay, right? But I never kept continuing on that skill development. Now I know that, my God, that was a huge error, because guys get better all the time, right? There's always room to improve. But how would you answer that question?
I would say, like, it's to your point. I would say, like, I would tell myself to stop and smell the roses, like to breathe it in and make sure that I'm appreciative of the space where I'm residing and be thankful for it. I would work on that as a skill set. Like I would make sure that I remind myself to play hard, but like it's a game. Like we should be playing. The fact of the matter is, you know, as much as everybody wants to play at the highest level, it's a very select group of people that are fortunate enough to do that. So you got to think in a lot of regards about everything else that's going on in the world, and yourself certainly as an athlete, but as a person, you know, that has to have a deeper skill set than that. So I would also say to myself, you know, and it's back to perspective again, create an environment for success for yourself. Make sure that you're focusing on other things outside of how. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, you know, and that goes back to the perspective again, you know. And in fact of the matter is, like, more isn't always better. Like when I play golf, the more I play, sometimes the worse I play, you know. It's like, and the more hockey is not necessarily going to make you better. I think a targeted approach to what you should be working on is way better. And if I focused way more on the mindset than the skill set, I would have been even better off, you know.
Wow, that's an advertisement for me and what I do. I mean, like I that's where I was going to go. I mean, and you just went there, but like that would be, hockey skills. I think the physical realm is really being exhausted, you know, and rightfully so. You know, like we have everything dialed in on that side: nutrition, you know, the how to train properly in the gym, all the skill development stuff that's going on the ice. I mean, everyone knows you have to skate in this day and age. Everyone knows you have to be able to puck handle. You know, so obviously work on those skills. But what I think is this massive opportunity is the mindset side of this. Like how does all of that come together for a player, and how do you handle the resiliency and the adversity and the perseverance? And like, those are skills. Your character is a skill, in my opinion. And I think that's what I do now. And that's what I'm passionate about, because I don't think enough people, I mean, you get the right coach in the right environment. Of course they talk about it as part of the culture, but it's not really taught as something you can improve. And you can improve it, right? So I'm glad you said that. I think mindset over skill set is kind of that hidden secret weapon, in essence.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jason. It's like it's unfortunate in a lot of regards. Like there's probably not enough athletes even that get there, let alone people that can convey it to young people, right? And so you think about these founding moments in our sports lives, and this casts across all sports, and maybe just life in general. Like so many tasks that we have to do, or how many tasks we make ask our children to do, right? So we create this like structure where it's all just task oriented, and it's not about creating perspective or balance necessarily. And then are we fortunate enough to have coaches, teachers, you know, parents in our life that can show us that, right? Probably the answer most of the times is no. So you've got to take it on yourself. Like it's got to be something that's ingrained on a daily basis, just to check in. You got to constantly check in, you know, just see how things are actually making you feel fundamentally. You know, it can't just be like head down and go with reckless ambition. There's got to be some, in the end, there's got to be some thoughtfulness to it to make sure that it's a rounded experience. And hopefully, you know, where you're able to get coaches and teachers and parents that can support that portion of the journey for you.
No, that's well. And you talked about it. One of the programs that I developed was called Building Championship Character, building championship hockey character specifically. And I broke down like some character traits that I think are really fundamentally essential, you know, to being a great athlete, and especially in the hockey world. Because I do think that there's a different culture around hockey, just in and of itself, the inherent nature of it being a team sport, and unlike a team sport like baseball or basketball, like there's a little bit more of a herd pack approach with hockey, right? That requires a few different personality traits. And one of the ones that I have on there in my top 10 is gratitude, which I think is
is very overlooked in a professional sports kind of realm, and what you think a hockey player needs to be, because we think tough and we think, gladiatorial and, like these competitive, which I think are all great traits. But when you combine gratitude in that mix, I think it keeps you more present and connected to the moment and what it is that you're doing, which is playing a game. And whether it's the junior level or the midget level or bantam level or pro level, like, to keep that in mind and to keep that very present. And I think that really helps with nerves. I think it helps with anxiety. I think there's a ton of things that it helps with as well. Can you maybe, and I teach that as like something that we can improve again, right? That is something that when we're conscious about it and we're intentional about it, you can become more grateful. And have you ever met somebody who's too grateful? I mean, that's just something that doesn't happen, right?
No, it doesn't happen. It's one of the, and my wife is the most grateful person I've ever met. She's thankful for everything, and it's like I'd never really been with somebody that's so vocal about her gratitude, and it's really infectious too, and it really honestly is one of the best things you work on, to be grateful for every experience, because none of it's guaranteed. There's not even really really a rhyme or a reason or even a recipe that has to be like a templated thing for you. Like the possibilities of life are endless. So in so many regards, like I've seen it time and time again. What is meant for us finds a way, and it finds a way faster if we're able to be truly present in that experience, because we can't receive the feedback that's given to us that can be a portion of dictating that direction if we're not present. And if you're not present and thankful for the receipt of that, then you don't have the perspective to be able to say, like, okay, how does this intersect to what I'm doing? This new variable, this new stimuli. How do I intersect this with what I'm doing? Or does this change the way that I want to do things just in general? I'm going to go this other route. So right. It's imperative value stuff. I mean, it just has to be there. And it is maybe the easiest thing you can do for yourself, to teach yourself to be thankful, because I truly believe it's for my wife, it's a repetitive thing in her mind, just to start with thankfulness, no matter what it is, and then work forward from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some great, gratitude is not like nobody's talking about it. It is in some circles very talked about. Depends on who you're following, who your social media kind of following is. But, there's some great gratitude practices that people can get into. And again, because it's a habit, right? I mean, it really is a habit, and you're conditioning your brain to develop that habit. So, to consciously start with a gratitude before bed or gratitude in the morning or something, that's a great way to start the day. And not to mention, like when you authentically show up being grateful, like say to a practice or to a 3-game losing streak or whatever the case may be, right? Like you change that mood in the room, you change the mood on your line. People want to be around you. People want to go to bat for you. Like that's the other thing that this happens. You don't want to do it. You don't want to use it like as a strategy, but those are some of the things that the fallout of being grateful, right? Like you have people that want to be around you. You have people that want you to be a part of their organization. So as an athlete, it definitely helps as well.
It does. And it's like, it's got to be genuine, and I think the way to make it genuine is to make it part of your being, of your essence, right? And if you get to the point where truthfully, and I think you can train yourself to feel that way, and it's authentic, it can be immediate, it's immediate almost, Yeah. And it's a really nice way also to put a marker in yourself to draw back, because so many times, like, the game gets away from you, you're stressed out about something over here or something over there, but all the while, like, it's still like, what do you do right now in this space? So if you're practicing and you've got stuff going on, school's not good, you're fighting with your parents, like whatever the thing is, coach is upset with you, it kind of doesn't matter, like in that moment where you have practice to do, or you have your schoolwork you got to do, or you've got game coming up this week, like whatever the thing is, like just to be able to draw back and be thankful that you have that opportunity to excel, have that opportunity to work on yourself, have that opportunity to have the camaraderie that I know we probably miss, being done from the game. That's the thing. Like, I wish I was ever more thankful about the camaraderie too. Just that in and of itself, because it's a beautiful thing to be on a team of like-minded people, trying to do the same thing, and you have so much shoulder time where you're, able to just have a lot of laughs. Like, how many laughs did you have when you played, like, with the boys and stuff like that? It's the best, So, just find those things that are constant reminders to draw back to presence, and then work forward from there.
Yeah. So we'll go back to your final year. So you go from a guy who has 2 goals or 6 goals in 3 seasons to 16 his final year. You get these accolades. Teams are calling. Did you you probably didn't have an agent till then, I assume. Did you get an agent halfway through that year or at the end of the year, or what happened with that?
It was a couple of few months into that season. I had a few agencies reach out, and again, I ended up making what I think was a great choice. Like I signed with a guy named Jeff Solomon, and Jeff's been with the LA Kings. Yeah, it's Sully. Yeah. Yes, he's been with the Kings for a while. He was my first agent. First 10 years I was with Sully, and he was the perfect agent for me. He really was. He was hands-on and boutique and had like a father figure style, but was also really smart and cared for me in my career to a really high degree. So I just, it's like sometimes you're right where you're supposed to be, and hopefully that the decisions you make, especially when you're inexperienced, end up becoming the right ones. You don't pick the wrong people. So
yeah. That's what I mean. And I mean, I kind of have a different story which I've told in here before. I went with Mike Barnett, who, I mean, he's a nice man. I saw him again, and like he's somebody that, I mean, he never wronged me at all, but he was just a really big fish, and I was a small fish, for a long time. So I needed the more boutique approach, especially with what happened with my career. And Tom Laidlaw I was trying to decide between Tom Laidlaw and him, and ended up going with Barnett. And that's why I ended up being with Solomon at the end of the day too, at one point there, because of the whole, anyways, the way that happened. But that's a big decision, and man, not one to be taken lightly. And I always, my lesson from that is it's not who they have, or it's not what they're about, but it is about that relationship. Like, do you want to be around him? Does he want to be around you? And understanding yourself, again, that identity of like, how do you think you're best served, right? As an athlete, are you somebody that needs somebody who's going to call you once a week? Or are you somebody who doesn't need anyone for the whole year, right? And like, in that matters. So you have to be able to ask those questions. But Michigan Tech, so you end up getting Solomon. 14 teams are throwing you first round money. Which, like, what is it at that time? Is that like $1 million kind of stuff? Like, was that signing bonus, or what was it? One way deal? What'd you get?
It's less than $1 million. So I ended up signing. It was like, I got, I think, 800 grand from the show. I joke around with people all the time. I was like, I had like $5 in my bank account, like, stealing chicken breasts and stuff. Like, seriously, like, it was like, because when you're a student athlete at school, they give you some money, but it's like, it's supposed to go to books, but it boils down in the end. Like, if you're not working another job, and I don't know how a student athlete could possibly also work a job and do that well, but like, you have no money. I mean, you're literally broke as a joke, So it went from that to, having all this money. And I think the Blues offered me like $950 or something. That was like the max. And then there were a few other teams in and around there, and a couple just under the Sharks. And it was a crazy position to be in, to just like make a choice like that,
Holy
especially
smokes.
coming out of,
So yeah, so wow. I always get, that's why my podcast goes so long, because a lot of people would just blow over that. But like, saying no to $150K when you have no money, is a huge thing. So that's like obviously something that was discussed with the agent. And you said that you were kind of picking through the lineup and where do I fit. So you decided to take a $150,000 haircut. But let's not even talk about that. Let's just talk about, how was that from a life change? Like, how did you handle $800,000? Like, was that? Did you have a couple reckless nights, or were you pretty responsible with it, or how did that all go?
I've always been pretty responsible, I think, and I was really responsible at that time, because you come through 4 years of having virtually no money, and then my family's got a humble background. My dad's a locksmith, and he worked really, really hard to care for us for his whole life. He's still working today, and so I got to see a man for a long time who like worked really, really hard, and he took care of us. But there's also you got to be responsible when you've got certain barriers. So I grew up in that kind of environment. So for me, it was, I don't know, I was never really, that wasn't really the thing for me. I think at that point I was like, okay, how am I going to make it now? Like, how am I going to actually do this? Right. So there are a few interesting things that happened there too. Like I got to go, I signed right out of school, and I got to go and finish the season in Lexington, Kentucky, which is where the American League team was. I played like 7 or 8 games or something like that. And then I got to go down and be a black ace with the Sharks for the playoff run. So I got to be with the team and travel with the team for the entire playoff run. So I got to know a lot of the guys and the staff, and got get a little bit more comfortable, even though it was like really crazy, watch Owen Nolan ripping around, Mike Ricci and all these just legends, right? So, but it gave me a certain comfort level. And then they kept me there that summer. I had my was that the second shoulder surgery or the third? I can't remember. I had a shoulder surgery that summer, and they wanted me to stay and rehab me and get me really strong. So I got to stay through the summer and spend time with the medical staff and everybody like that. And then I went into the rookie camp that next year, and I had a really good rookie camp.
Were you in a one-way?
I was on a two-way contract. Everybody was on a two-way back then. So, there were no guarantees. And so I went into the rookie camp, had a good rookie camp. And then from there, I actually made the club out of training camp my first year.
Oh, you did?
Which was crazy. They sent me down for a couple of stints just because the distance between San Jose and Lexington was so far. So when they'd send you down for like 2-3 weeks. And then you didn't know if you were coming back up, but you kind of just went down again, and you worked really hard and tried to play the game the right way and get back up. So thankfully that was the case. You'll see with the games that I played the first 2 years, I sat in the press box a lot, watched a lot of hockey games, which was, I don't think at the time was like a great thing for me. And it kind of led to, the next thing, and there were, a couple sliding doors types of things there with the Sharks too, and I had started fighting some guys in training camp and even the early parts of the regular season. And I was doing pretty well, and I was fighting a lot of heavyweight guys, and I was never really like the player I thought I'd be. But it was going well, and that was a different time in the game. I mean, you remember what it was like back then. I mean, every team had 2, 3, 4 guys that just loved to fight. So I kind of got into that just because of my size, and I always sort of took on that responsibility, I think. Well, what happened next was kind of a big change, right? So we had Brant Myers was our heavyweight. And at the time, Brant was dealing with some substance abuse problems. He's been, I think, clean now for like a decade or whatever, thank goodness. But he was in the program, substance abuse program, and then they pulled him out. So they pulled Brant out of he was like suspended from play, I think, for a couple of months. So like, oh, it's okay. We got this big college kid that we didn't know could fight. So now I'm lining up on the wing. They're not even playing me on defense anymore. They put me on the wing. I'm playing against like the Matt Johnsons and Scott Parkers and all these. I'm fighting like literally all the heavyweights, and it became the worst thing that probably could have ever happened. Because now I've had all kinds of anxiety and stress, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. Despite the fact that I could do it, to some level, and it kind of started to typecast me a bit. And then it just, the writing was on the wall there that I wasn't going to be what I wanted to be there. So they ended up exposing me in the expansion draft, and I went to the Wild and kind of, was playing defense there. And then Jacques actually tried to turn me back into a forward, believe it or not. He's putting me in front of the net on the power play, because I always had pretty decent hands for a big guy, and I was pretty strong on my skates. So he started to try to turn me back into a forward. And I had some injuries, and that wasn't going the way. So I literally went in to Mike Ramsey at the time, who was a defense coach. And I said, "Hey, Rammer, I think I'm meant to be a defenseman in this league. What do you think? What do you think about that? Is there anything you can do to help me?" And he looked me square in the eye and he said, "Suts," he says, "you'll never be a defenseman in this league." And that was it for me. Like the next day I went into, think about it, Jacques Lemaire, right? Mike Ramsey tells you you're never going to be a defenseman in the league. Doug Risebrough is the GM. So I walk into Doug's office, not in any kind of like way other than to just plead with the man and be like, and I still felt it fundamentally. This is back again to like just holding true to yourself, strong to your identity. And I went in, I said, "Reiser," I said, "if there's any way you could trade me somewhere where somebody would want me as a defenseman, I would really appreciate it, because I believe fundamentally that this is the road for me to have a long and successful career." And I think I caught him off guard. I didn't think he would have expected that from a young player. I was only 23 or 24 years old at that time. And he traded me to the Thrashers in less than a week. And that was really like probably the pivot point of my whole career, because I got to go in there and start to play defense again. They brought in Bob Hartley the year after I got there, and Bob came in, and the first thing he said to me in his broken French English, he says, "Suts, I heard that you can play the game." He's like, "You haven't shown it yet." He said, "I'm going to play you 30 minutes a night, and we're going to find out." So he literally did. He literally wouldn't take me off the ice, and that was the time. And I always say with people too, I don't know if it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Like, do you have to play well to get more ice time, or do you have to get more ice time and then play well? Right? It's such a tough thing as a coach, and I dealt with it so many different ways. Like, I had spaces in my career where I was a 5, 6, 7 defenseman. I had a solid, 5 years in Atlanta where I was in the top pair and I was playing over 30 minutes a night. That's that part where, redefinition, perspective, and then sometimes you're just in a situation where that's just what you are, and you have to choose to either accept it or you've got to choose to make a statement. So I held, I feel like the holding true to that self-belief and then putting an action plan together. And then thankfully, I had a GM that I was incredibly respectful to a young player's position, and he pulled the trigger on it. And it was a chain of events that sort of like,
right.
Set me free.
Well, how did that, because just for everyone listening, and even for me, like, so, the size of the cojones on you there was big, like you had the big signing bonus, but you said you're a press box guy up and down to the minors in San Jose, right? So you hadn't, I would assume you didn't feel like you had established yourself in the NHL at that point, right? And then you go to Minnesota and you have a full season there. So you play 69 games, but you're still, like you yourself said, you're kind of mixed identity. You don't really know what's up or down. You probably don't really feel comfortable with what your role is. And then that next year you say, I want to trade, and it happens for you. What was the end of that conversation like with Doug? Did you remember like what he said?
Yeah, I think he said, I appreciate your position, and let me see what I can figure out. And I always carry myself, I think with a lot of integrity, and I was definitely passionate, and I was always kind to everybody. Like, I was always really close with the staff. And so I think he had a respect for me as a person, and maybe even respect for like what I was trying to accomplish, because he'd already accomplished it, and maybe he's like, this is a guy who has this, maybe that's the first thing, like where you're like, where Luke Skywalker realizes that he's a Jedi, and he's got or Neo in the Matrix, when you can finally realize the way that that this is your identity. And again, it's like these movies always line up where, the lead always finds a place where he like trusts implicitly that this is what he is. That belief is the underlying thing that allows us, I believe, to like to propel ourselves, because in the end, like, we're constantly tested. The game itself tests us. The external variables put stresses and influences on us that make it challenging to duplicate, right, and do the same thing. And even for you, like as a goal scorer, like I was so glad I was never a goal scorer, because that it's so hard to just put up goals and points all the time. I mean, it's like, it's so much easier in some regards, like especially being a big defenseman, for me to focus on blocking shots, hitting people, making a good first pass. In a lot of ways, like I could set some parameters in place and then put those on auto repeat, where it really was like, okay, like this guy has a serious skill set. He's very hard to get around because he's big and he's fairly mobile for his size. He's got a good shot from the point. He gets it off in the right way and he makes a great first pass. He blocks shots like a madman, and he's hard to play against. I like that better than like having to do what you had to do, putting up points all the time where you're like looked at, and that's such a lightning in the bottle kind of thing oftentimes, right? Like to be able to stay hot and be able to constantly produce. And as well as I do, like the guys that do that consistently, they're like it's a whole other level. I mean, like it's ridiculous, right? The guys that like the Ryan Getzlaffs of the world, and all these guys that just machines, right? So it's just another level.
Yeah, from a skill set side, then also from like to get position that you are that guy, right, in that organization, that you just keep getting put out there again and again and again until you find the puck starts finding the net again, right? Like that's a special place too. I mean, I liked how you brought that up with Risebrow there, because that was, we speaking again to the person behind the player, and you're probably 100% right, because if somebody else walks in that office and asks that question a little different way, or without the resume, kind of, the in the locker room type resume, you could have been on the next flight down to the minors quite easily, right? Like, yeah. So, that again, that I can't stress that enough because I don't hear anyone else talking about it. Like the guys that do really well usually had somebody that wanted to go to bat for them.
Yeah.
Right. And why do they want to do that? Right. There has to be some type of an emotional connection there, right? Like some reason, some respect, something, right? For Doug Risebrough to do that. You get into a situation in Atlanta, which, I mean, I've talked to Brad Larson on here before. Did you play with Brad when he was there?
Yeah, Clutch is one of my all-time faves.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about Lars. But I mean, he went from Colorado to Atlanta, right? So he went from like being on one of the best teams in the NHL to Atlanta. You can speak to that because San Jose was a pretty good club there for a couple of years too, right? So you kind of felt like that was about. And he said that it's almost like you're not even playing in the same league. Yeah. You know, like it felt so different, you know, for him. But you're an NHLer. So like, can you talk about that? You know what I mean? Like just about that, playing in Atlanta, a team that's not having success, yet still having to be a professional because you're in the greatest league in the world.
Yeah, it's, you know, and I can remember distinctly. I'd still, you know, talk about it all the time with people. I mean, being pinned in our end for like literally like 15 minutes at a time, like not even being able to break the puck out, you know, because we were severely outmatched in a lot of regards, you know, and you know, but to your point, like you've got to just keep maintaining the professionalism, the drive, the passion to do better, the motivation to uplift your teammates, hopefully to lead by example and come back renewed with renewed optimism the next day, renewed energy to try to make tomorrow a better day. And, you know, we lived through a pretty stark transition with that organization, you know, like, you know, I got in there and, you know, Heatley and Kovalchuk were just in their second season when I got there. And, we hadn't rounded out as a team. Then we, you know, go through the situation with Danny's accident and Dan Snyder's death. And that was crazy. But then we start, you know, I think start playing better. You know, Bob Hartley brought in some really good systems. We get Kari Lehtinen as a goalie who turns out to be an absolute stud. Right. And then we attract the Greg DeVries of the world, and we attract the Scott Mellenbys and the Bobby Holiks and the Marian Hosas and the Slava Kozlovs and the Mark Savards, right? So now you see this team starting to build and grow. You know, Eric Belanger was there. You get Brad Larson in, so you get these really great role players. You know, Garnet Exelby was coming up, and he was starting to really show himself as a tough defense. So we really started to kind of round out, you know, what we were doing there, and from that standpoint, I think, you know, it is really cool to be through that transition because we definitely spent a lot of time in the doldrums, you know, not winning enough hockey games. And it's like, you know, you're a pro, your responsibility is to do your job. And then nobody likes to lose all the time. You know, you're going to lose some games certainly, but like, you know, that kind of mindset when you're on a team where you're really, you know, fundamentally you're mostly outmatched. So it's a tough space to exist in, you know, because you need a selection of miracles usually to win against you know, I remember we played against the New York Rangers when we finally made the playoffs in, I think it was 06, 07. We finally made the playoffs. The organization made the playoffs for the first time, and we play the Rangers, and we were first place in the Southeast Division, and we played the Rangers. So we had home ice advantage. And they swept us 4 straight. And I think Michael Nylander had the puck like 75% of the time. It was like ridiculous. Nobody could even get the puck off of him. We go into Madison Square Garden for game 3 after losing the first 2 games at home. And I think they blew us out like 7 or 8-0, you know, and it's just like from the anthem they sing there to like that annoying song they play when they score every time. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like we are so outmatched, you know, but you know, and then you see how hard it is to win consistently in the NHL because we go from that season and we had all those players I mentioned earlier, and then they literally dismantled the team. I went away, Savvy went away, Marian Hossa went away. So the team was dismantled shortly thereafter. So it was you know, it's for these teams that win on a consistent basis, it's so impressive.
Take another short break from the episode here with Mr. Andy Sutton to tell you a little bit about where you can find me, which is upmyhockey.com. You can find out what I do to work with teams, what I do to work with academies, individual players, and also about my Up My Hockey family membership, which gets my programs, which gets workshops, which gets access to me. It's something that I'm really excited about, that a lot of people are taking part in, and you can find that on the website as well, upmyhockey.com, under services. It also includes a Facebook group on Facebook for parents. It's called Up My Hockey /parent group. It's a private group. It is completely free. There is lots of value inside there. And if you are a little hesitant to take the plunge right off the bat, which you shouldn't feel hesitant, because I promise you the value is vast and wide and broad, and it's all the areas that your athlete needs, that your current program, I'm sure, is not diving into the way that I do. Talking about character, talking about mindset, mental toughness, the traits required to get noticed and to take advantage of opportunities, where we empower athletes to step into their greatness and to really find what makes them great. How can they become their best? Giving them the tools to do that. So yeah, that's at upmyhockey.com. Again, the Facebook group is Up My Hockey Parent Group. Please join us there, check us out, and become part of the community. Now back to the episode with Andy Sutton.
It really is. It's all, it's all culture based, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the one thing that Lars spoke to, is just like the culture in Colorado. Like the only thing that was important was whether they won the game or not. And he said he came to Atlanta and it was, guys are breaking their sticks because they didn't get, quite enough minutes, or they didn't win the game, or, he didn't get the apple, or, whatever the case may be. And he was just like, where am I? What is this all about? This isn't what I was taught from the Joe Sackett's and the Forsbergs of the world, right? So it would be super different. And then, like, I'm just wondering too, and probably not in the moment, but you said you were a 1-2 pair there for a while, and I mean this with no disrespect at all. Like, that would probably correlate into maybe a 3-4 or a 5 guy on a playoff team, correct? Like, would that how you would see that?
I at that time, like, I was playing good hockey. I really was. And I think, I wouldn't have been a 1-2 pair on a lot of teams for sure, but I think there would have been 10 teams on the league. I'd have been a 1-2-3 guy. Right. The next 10, maybe a 2-3-4 guy. And then the next,
that was the top. When did you get your second contract? Was that in Atlanta?
I got my second contract in Minnesota. And then I got my next contract in Atlanta. And at that time, I wasn't a free agent until I was 32 years old. Like, you had to pay your dues, Right. So I didn't become a free agent until 2007, I think. I played almost a decade at that point. Right. So yeah. It's like, you really had to pay.
Right. Yeah. That's crazy. So that's like probably the first real big, windfall or payday, but like even that comes into careers, right? Is kind of why I was going with that, is because some of these, let's just take an Ottawa right now, or Detroit, somebody that's playing right now. Like, a lot of those guys on that team wouldn't have an NHL job if they were somewhere else, Yeah. But they do, and they're playing, and they're getting that opportunity to play. And now they're becoming recognized as NHLers, and they're going to be NHLers, right? So to your point of like where you picked to sign originally, like, super does matter, because you can be stuck being a good player in an organization with no place to play.
That's right. It does matter. And I don't love thinking about the excuses, like whether this coach, messed my career up because he didn't this or that. And a lot of people go down that road. A lot of people have those stories to tell, in the end, one of Keith Kachuk's great expressions was he'd be like, "Hey, you want to make more money?" It's like, yeah, play better. Right. So, like, in the end, you've got to make the most of what you have. And if you're getting limited minutes, there's stuff you can do. You can still make an impact. Is it easier when you're told to go over the boards every second or third shift, and you're going out and you're in the flow of the game? Sure, it is. Is it better? Do you have more chance to succeed if you're on the first power play unit than getting the last 25 or 30 seconds on a second unit? 100%. Yeah. But at the same point in time, if you're that guy on that second unit and you get 25, 30 seconds, you got 25, 30 seconds to make the most of it and grab some attention. And maybe you're the next guy when somebody's not putting it in the net on the first unit to go there. So it's like, you gotta just kind of keep it in perspective and just keep trudging and try to work within the constructs of what you're dealing with, because, whether or not a coach is in line with the athlete you are or the athlete you're trying to become is kind of independent of what you're trying to do for yourself. So, sure. And then
independent contractor at the end of the day. I mean, you really are. I mean, I talk about being a team guy, and that's super important. But I mean, you are there for you, right? I mean, you're there to try and make money and to extend your career and do what you can to make those things work. That must have been like the most, I would assume, one of the greatest things you ever heard when he says, I'm going to play you 30 minutes. I mean, like how that would probably have opened you up and allowed you to become, step into that potential of you as a player and to show what you can do and not have to punch people out to get your next shift, but just go play some hockey and become Andy Sutton. I mean, you must be super thankful for that opportunity.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I really relished the opportunity to play against the other team's top players, and at the time we're in the Southeast Division, so we played the Hurricanes and the Lightning and the Capitals 8 times a year, and Ovechkin in his prime, and Le Cavalier, Saint Louis, Richards, Prospel, all those guys, and then Stahl and Eric Cole and those guys in Carolina. So I mean, it was a big responsibility, and I think I enjoyed that, being the first guy out on the PK, and there was even some time where I was the first guy out on the power play there. I think I had 7 or 8 power play goals the one year, which was really good for a guy that really was never known for that. Awesome. And that was fun, right? That was a lot of fun. So yeah, I think that time spent there was definitely formative, and really probably cast my at least belief in myself that I could do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, for sure, because you proved it. I mean, that's the thing is. Well, you already mentioned it. You mean like getting more ice to allow you to be good, or being good to allow you to get more ice? I mean, when both of those can kind of come in and in the back of your head or even the front of your head that, I'm going to get out the next shift. I'm going to get out the next shift and I can go play. Wade Redden spoke to that. I mean, his rookie year, he said there were some injuries. I mean, he was a really high draft pick, but they essentially told him that you're going to play, kid. I mean, go out and play. And he said like that message like really, really helped. I mean, he'd be lying to say if it didn't. The fact that he knew he was going to go out there allowed him to gain some roots, to gain some confidence, to not be squeezing the stick too tight. And then I think, I mean, not all teams can do that though, right? And that's the thing. But at least then you allow the player to show what he's about. When your leash is this long, I mean, like that's a pretty tough environment to play in for anyone. And even Jerome McGinley talked about that. He's like, I always had respect for the fourth line guys. He's like, I thought I understood that role, but he's like, at the end of my career when I was in Colorado and I was that guy, he's like, it is so hard to be in that role and to try and play free and to try and be able to do what you know you can do. Because he's like, limited minutes, you can't make mistakes. You're in a different role. And he's, he won the Maurice Richard Trophy, right? Yeah. This guy, right? And he's saying he had a hard time with it. Imagine a 20-year-old coming up and given that type of minutes, right? It's tough.
Well, it's tough, and if you're in that position, you're probably a stud wherever you came from. So you're used to being the guy out there. So now it's affecting your ego, right? Because that's the other thing. Like you're used to being the guy, you're used to being the man, and now all of a sudden, like you're fighting for shoulder minutes, and that's where a lot of guys. And I don't know if this was the same case for you or not, but I can remember like very distinctly Steve Gawala. Right. So Stevie was part of San Jose when I was there. And for whatever reason or not, like couldn't figure out how to sustain in the NHL, but he'd go down and win the scoring championship in the American League every single year. Right. But he couldn't, or maybe didn't want to, or like to be the big fish, more than he'd like to go down and have all the pressure and being on the second power play unit. Because he's not going to go down and take Owen Nolan's position. I mean, so let's be honest. So then, he goes back down to Lexington and he can stay on for the full 2 minutes and he's racking up points left, right, and center. So it's like, there's it's kind of it, especially if you're an offensive guy, I think it's really challenging. To make it, because you've got to play enough to play the minutes, because you see it now. I mean, the third and fourth lines, they're all fast. They're all like hard checking. They're probably predominantly defense first. And there's still a lot of skill on those lines now. It's not like the game in the 90s when, third and fourth line was a different subset of players. You had your sort of offensive guys, and then you had the guys that were just pure pluggers, and like the guys can all really, really play now. And then, but still, the top players are so much better. So they're gonna eat up the lion's share of the imperative minutes, So you gotta understand what you're up against too, and have a realistic set of expectations.
Yeah, I heard you on I can't remember where, but you talked about Ilya Kovalchuk a little bit, and just whatever. I mean, his skill set was tough to argue with, but just more like what he was like in the locker room. And I've spoke to that here before too. Like, it's really hard to have I mean, I don't know what you want to call it. Let's just say a bad fish, like he's a little bit selfish. He's about himself. It's tough to win when your best player is like that, like really hard, especially young. I mean, and I also have bridged the gap. And not that I'm saying these guys that don't have great characters. I think Connor McDavid does. And I think Jack Eichel does from everything that I've heard about. But when these young guys are the studs of the team, right, and they're the focal point, and they have all this pressure from, the organization and from the media and from everything else. And now they're supposed to be leading the team. If he's not that character individual, like how the hell is everyone else supposed to, like, how are you supposed to be successful in that? That makes it super hard, doesn't it?
It does. And I think the NHL made a mistake when they let the free agency age go so young, because I don't think they really looked at the fact that every top player was essentially going to get dollar cost average and going to get a long-term contract, 50, 60 million bucks after a year and a half or 2 years of playing in the league. How do you keep around a 10-year veteran then? I mean, because if you're doing it right and you're in your 10th year, like, you should be making more money than you were making in your third year. So at a certain point, like, how do you afford that guy who's so pivotal to the organization and the young guy that you're trying to keep so you don't lose him at 26 years old? I don't think they were thoughtful enough about how that would work, and it created an interesting dichotomy that didn't become conducive for the growth of the game. And I think that's where, when you see these, like, and I hate to say this, but like, sometimes when I watch the game, I see these captains and I look at their faces, I'm like, that's a child captain. Like, that's literally, and there's not just one of them anymore. There's a multitude of them in the league, and they're not the Jerome McGinley's of the league. You know what I mean? It's a different type of player now. So I don't know. I think it's a lot for a young person to contend with. I mean, I think the whole lifestyle is a lot to contend with. I think the journey there is a lot, and I think figuring out how to stay there is a pretty daunting thing to do. If you're able to play for a long time, you had to jump through a lot of hoops along the way, for sure.
Yeah, and it's good to have those. I mean, I don't know, like, the role models matter. I mean, the one experience I had in Detroit, and it was a brief one, but at training camp, and just seeing how that organization ran, and how those guys in their 30s, like, were just like these galvanizing pieces of, like, what this whole thing was about. And then, the Nick Lidstroms and the Zetterbergs and the Datsyks, like, they were just all part of the same bus, going the same direction. And it was really cool to see what that was like, and definitely use that since that in business and my approach to other things, right? Of how to keep everyone collectively going the same direction. But yeah, man, the league's different. That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, in some ways better, in some ways worse, I think. It's so young that I don't think they really, like, I think what we had to go through to get in, it was maybe a little bit too brutal, maybe a little bit too tough. And now it almost seems like it's too far the other way, especially maybe from, like, our perspective going in. Like, I don't know. How do you feel about that arrival point for these guys now?
Well, I mean, I lived it, so in my final, few years, I really got to see it happen, and never more, glaring than my final time in Edmonton, right? I think there were 7 first rounders on that team that I went and played with. I mean, it was insane, right? And then, you saw the amount of money that started to flow, and it's for how young the players are. I think there still should be some sort of rite of passage. I really do. I think it's too easily granted, honestly, and then the leagues become all about youth. I mean, it's like there's the time of the length of players' careers is going down, because there's just not room for the third, fourth line guys that are tenured. Unless you're doing something really special, they're not going to fill that space with a veteran player. Because it's all about breeding the next youth and finding out which young guy you can dollar cost average to hang on to, and which ones you're going to let go, because there's a constant onslaught of new players coming in to fill those positions. So I think we got it wrong with that. I think that having that really strong fundamental veteran leadership and is a very important part to maintaining the cultural support that you need to basically have a successful franchise. That's not to say that certain teams can't do it with younger players, but at the same point in time, I think there are just fundamentally things you learn after spending time doing something.
Yeah.
That is of imperative value. And then I think there needs to be that disparity between the older leaders and the younger, like up and coming players. Because there was a respect coefficient there that made this younger player, have to embody certain things that were fundamental to just understanding what it was to be a pro for 10 years or 12 years, and then that person can indoctrinate all of those things and become that athlete. But I don't think it can happen to the same degree without this governing body up here, managing these things.
Yeah, mentoring and role modeling. I mean, which is interesting though, which is one of the things that I'm preaching like all the time with the teams I'm working with and my athletes is like, because I mean, I talk to the directors of player development and directors of player personnel, and like the character, the fabric of that person's character is maybe more relevant now than ever because of what we're just talking about, right? Like if you would take Ilya Kovalchuk or Jonathan Toews now in a draft, you would take Jonathan Toews. His ceiling isn't as high from a skill set, but you know what you're getting when he arrives there, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Like he doesn't need that much modeling to go, right? He's going to lead that team at 21 and he's going to do a great job of it. And because there isn't those external forces or as many of them, right, to help, mold and craft and change these players. So like I do think that, teams are looking for that more maybe than in the past. Like it was all about talent. I shouldn't say all about, but talent was a really high bar. And we're going to take the most talented guy. I think they do a lot more homework now on what these guys are like so they can put those pieces in at a younger age because they have to. You can't run the Scally cap now unless your young guys aren't playing on the team, right? They have to. So anyways, it's a pretty wild game, and I couldn't imagine being a GM in today's day and age. It's not as easy to just go out there and sign whatever piece you need anymore, right? It's definitely a developmental thing. You got to bring in young guys. You have to draft well. You got to make sure you're getting the most out of your players and picking the right personality pieces that are going to support winning culture. And that's easier said than done. Anyways, we're rolling up on an hour and a half here, and I told you we'd go 90 minutes, and I think we have plans of coming back here and maybe going through a little bit more. So, tell us a little bit. You put Verbero hockey there, in our last 8 minutes here. I'd like to talk about once you got out of the game, you kind of became a serial entrepreneur a little bit. I know that you had the school background, and you if you're not doing something, you get antsy. So, talk about kind of your arrival there with Verbero and what's Verbero's all about.
Yeah, so I started developing some intellectual property in the protective space while I was still playing. I started when I was with the Ducks and finished up when I was with the Oilers and started working on licensing programs for those components. And I started working with Easton and a few other companies. And when Easton was consumed by Bauer, the program got squashed. So I at that point in time went and worked for a hockey company. So I was acting president of a company called Wholesale Sports Inc. for about 4.5 years. And during my time there, I got to take a look at all facets of it. I got to look at manufacturing, sourcing, and production and product development, definitely marketing and e-commerce, and even down to warehouse management. I mean, I really got to learn a lot of facets of the business. And while I was there, I was able to invest in some of the acquisitions that occurred while I was there. The First Star brand from BC was a company that I owned for almost 4 years, and I was able to work on that during my time there. And then we acquired Verbero while I was there, and I lent some money to the company while I was there on some things, and managed a lot, wore a lot of hats for that company. Well, I was able to sort of right around the start of COVID position some of the assets I had, pull some stuff off the table, and then I left some in behind with the intention to take Verbero outside. I always knew I wanted to do some things differently, and I needed that time probably to understand the back end side of the business to be able to really cast Verbero into a place where it can be successful and into a modern approach. So I took a lot of the best bits from Verbero, made our carbon fiber skate even better, brought in a 350 gram stick that I was working on with another manufacturer. We built an online software to create team stores, which didn't exist, bought an apparel factory so that we could service apparel, all the game wear, bags, accessories, to a really high degree. And then we changed the rep force structure as well. We allow our reps to sell anywhere to anybody. They can build their own sub rep forces. So essentially, like, people that we bring in Could be the dad that's tired of paying too much, spends all the time in the rink. It could be the mom that manages the team orders. It could be the manager, the coach. It could be virtually anybody could come in and join us, and then build a team under them. We build custom catalogs for everybody. We build team stores for the teams that we approve, and then outside of that, we just really focus on one amazing product per category. We don't try to sell a whole bunch of reskinned products that look the same to hit different price points. Our mission is to have the best product at the best possible price, and we sell player direct to everybody. So from that regard, like, we want to put value and performance and innovation in the same sentence without compromise. And that's just a relentless pursuit that won't stop. And we're applying it to men's hockey, women's hockey, youth hockey. We're really, I think, blowing the doors off, and then making stuff more accessible than it's ever been, because our team stores allow fans, allow players, allow parents, managers to access the products with their team or organization's logo on them 24/7, 365. So we've got a program that's robust. Certainly, it's rooted in great quality product at great price points, and then we want to make it accessible, because never more has our game probably needed that level of access from an accessibility standpoint and from a cost effectiveness standpoint. So we're trying now, mostly more than anything, just to get in front of people and let them know what we are, because it's a paradigm shifting brand. I mean, it's different than the status quo, certainly, and we're having great success with it. I mean, it's been very intuitive to everybody we've spoken to this point.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds exciting. Yeah, so Verbero.com for people who want to check it out. I do use the stick right now and the gloves, and I'm definitely a campaigner for the brand. I mean, I love the stick. The stick's amazing. Super light, shoots well, it's really durable. Gloves are great right out of the box. So I mean, those are the first two things that I've tried, and I think if everything else is like that, it's definitely worth trying out. Excited to get my jerseys too. I ordered some jerseys from Andy, so we're going to see for my spring team what they're all about, and I'm sure they're going to be great too. I forgot, if we have time for the one story. Kirk Muller is involved, or his daughter is involved in Verbero. And for those of you who know my history, know that I was traded for Kirk Muller from Florida to Toronto my rookie year. And so Andy has a connection to Kirk as well. Like, can you maybe tell that story? We should have talked about it when you were a teenager there. We were covering that time in your career, but that's probably a good one to end with.
Yeah, so we've signed on about 20 ex-NHLers now. We're really building our team. We've got a lot of the top women involved, and interestingly, I hadn't talked to Kirk in a while, and I always made sure that I bumped into him throughout my career. I played against him a little bit in the end of his career, certainly, and then when he was coaching and affiliated with the game, I'd always go out of my way to say hello. But when I was 16 and 17, playing junior B, and I didn't have any money. That there was a really great pro skate in Kingston, and I basically was told by Kirk that I could come and play, and I said, well, I don't think I can afford like $250 a week or whatever it was at the time. And he's like, don't worry, I've got you. So Kirk actually paid for my summer hockey for 2 summers, and I'm like forever indebted. That was like one of the most defining moments in my life, because I really got to see at a young age what it was like and what it meant to be with pros like that. And at the time, like, we had Kirk, we had Wendell Clark, we had Scott O'Neill, we had Doug Gilmore would skate with us. We had like literally some of the best pros in the game that would call Kingston home in the summertime. And we had a skate then that endured beyond that, with the Matt Bradleys and the Matt Cooks and the Brandon Converys and the I'm trying to think of all the guys. There were so many, that we had, and we had just an amazing skate. So that was kind of like, the greatest sort of full circle event with Verbero is I've been reconnecting with people I haven't spoken to in 30 years that are now on our sales rep force. Getting Kirk, who brought his daughter on, and he's probably bringing his son-in-law Brad Malone on, who's still the pro and the captain in Bakersfield. It's our program is a beautiful hockey ecosystem, because it really is boutique. It's intimate, it's direct, it's intentional. Everything has a rhyme and a reason. And then we're able to connect with people like yourself, who have people that have faith in you. And then we're just kind of cascading the word on down through our infrastructure.
Right. No, that's awesome. What was just back to Kirk and paying for your stuff? Like what allegiance did he have to you, or why? Like, how would that even come about? Why would he put you under your wing and want to write a check for you?
I'll have to ask him that. He obviously saw something, and maybe it was potential, maybe it was my eagerness, maybe I was just really, kind to him, and he appreciated it, and he was making great money, and he was captain of the Montreal Canadiens. And I don't really know, but he saw something in me, I guess, that we wanted to give a young guy an opportunity to skate with those pros in the summertime. And it was, I mean, if that doesn't happen, well, I don't know what happens. It's like that type of thing. It was a crazy thing. And I was able to learn what it meant to be a pro, to see these guys and how they train and how they skate and do those drills at that speed when I probably wasn't there yet, so it gave me the windows to look through to see where I wanted to go, and gave me some of the tools to figure out how to get there. And then I think that was such a founding rooting principle for me in the way that I always treated the players, the managers, the equipment managers, the staff when I played. I always went out of my way to make sure that I wasn't the older guy that was not taking care of the young guys. Like, I think in the end, that was one of the things that kept me around, an extra couple of years, especially in Edmonton there. I think, I became as much a player coach as just a player. So in the end, I tried to pay it forward.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a ton of names there, and that's why we'll have you on again. We'll talk more of Ribeiro for sure. And yeah, I'm just looking. Yannick Tremblay I played with there in the Rock, and Convery was my centerman. Eric Belanger was a centerman of mine in Lowell. And anyways, obviously hockey is like that, isn't it? You don't have to play too many places to have a lot of first connections there. So anyways, a lot of great names. And I love that too. I mean, your connection with Ribeiro, meeting all these other guys, that's what this podcast has done for me, is like bringing me back in touch with all these guys I used to play with. And I couldn't be more thankful for that. Love the conversations and reconnected and hearing the stories. And often the stories that you don't talk about that stuff during your career, right? Like when you're playing with them, you're not talking about what the junior league was like, or, what adversity you went through with a coach or whatever, right? Like to kind of have a little bit of a reflection opportunity with some of these players has been awesome. And so thank you today, Andy. Thanks for everyone who joined in today for Andy's story, for hearing what it was like to come out of nowhere, to be a free agent signing there with San Jose. I'm actually gonna have on Brant Myers next week. I played with him in Spokane. So read his book, and we're going to dig into some of that stuff you talked about. Yeah. So I was going to maybe ask you a few more questions about him, but anyways, we didn't have to stop if we didn't want to, but we'll stop it now. So thanks for everyone for tuning in. We were live here again today on Facebook for episode 55 about my hockey. Please check out Ribeiro.com. Something Andy's very passionate about, a really good product line, and we'll have him back on here to talk more about that and what I'm doing with Andy in that space as well. So thanks again, Andy. Appreciate your time today.
My pleasure, Podes. Have a good one, buddy.
Awesome.
Thanks again for being here for the entire episode. I love people who stick around to the end because that's what it's all about, Not what you do, but it's how you do it. That's why I say my athletes all the time. So if you're going to start something, you might as well finish it. So thanks again for sticking around to the end. Andy is a great interview, really eloquent in his words. I'm glad I was able to ask him some things that he couldn't really remember about his dad behind the bus and all this stuff. So he's going to have some conversations with his dad, and perhaps we'll bring him back on. But really good stuff as far as mindset concerned, as far as using gratitude as a tool. So important to practice gratitude in a meaningful way. You don't just want to dip your toe in the water when it comes to that. This is something that helps us navigate life, and not to mention our hockey careers. So as parents, as coaches, if we can cultivate gratitude and show how we're using gratitude to these athletes in our lives, they are much more likely to incorporate it themselves. Lots of ways we can do that. Lots of ways we can benefit from them. One of my masterclass workshop experts and friends, Mike Shaw, came in my for my membership group and gave a workshop on gratitude, and how he delivered it in a way that he uses gratitude as a way to manage resiliency and to make you more gritty. And two words that hockey players really like, that kind of coincide more with what people typically think hockey players need, which is to be gritty and to be able to handle or to be resilient. Often gratitude isn't something that gets talked about, but an athlete who can develop gratitude is able to be more gritty and is able to be more resilient and is able to better handle anxiety in the moment. So really good stuff there. I know we talked about other stuff, but gratitude just rings true to me right now, and it's been a part of my day, something that I've been trying to cultivate when I wake up and also when I go to bed at night, and it helps with my perspective during the day and how to handle the little bumps and valleys throughout the day. So hope you enjoyed this one. Once again, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for making Up My Hockey a part of your life and your living routine. I really hope we're providing value, and if you haven't yet given me a review there on iTunes, we'd love to see it. It really does help. So as always, you are appreciated. I am thankful, and play hard and keep your head up.